Okay, we're streaming. Councillors, everyone's here. I recognise there's a quorum. I therefore call to order full council meeting of 15th November.
Mayor, could we deal with item 3 separately, because I'd like to declare a real or perceived conflict of interest due to my involvement as a member and patron of the Gold Coast Show Society. But I've considered my position and firmly believe I will participate in debate and vote on this matter.
Okay, we'll go to 3. Councillor Gates.
Mr Mayor, I would also like to declare a perceived conflict of interest due to my membership and my honorary membership of the Gold Coast Turf Club.
Okay. Just hold thing down. I don't have an honorary because I don't want to, no? But I've got a membership there.
If you're just an ordinary member, no conflict.
Okay. Right, councillors, I just ask Mr CEO, I didn't accept the honorary membership, but I've got my own membership, and with that, my advice to me was I don't need to pass that on in case some of you who's got a membership and wanting to declare it. You don't have to if you don't want to. If you want to, you can. Right, Councillor Belden.
Mr Mayor, I recognise that my involvement with the Gold Coast Show Society in that I'm a patron and life member may be taken as a real or perceived conflict of interest in the matter before the meeting, but I've considered my position and am firmly of the opinion that I can participate in the debate and vote on this matter in the public interest.
Anyone else? Councillor Caldwell.
Mr Mayor, I'll just declare that I have a real or perceived conflict of interest in this matter due to my honorary membership of the Gold Coast Turf Club, but I feel that I can participate in debate and vote in this matter in the public interest.
Okay. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I recognise my involvement with the as honorary membership of the Racing Club could reasonably be taken as a real or perceived conflict of interest in this matter before the meeting, but I've considered my position. I'm firmly of the opinion that I can participate in debate and vote on the matter in the public interest.
Councillor McDonald.
Mayor, I think we all received honorary membership.
Some of us rejected it, you see, I did.
Well, I just can't recall, but I better declare it just in case. However, due to the honorary membership, but I've considered my position and firmly of the opinion that I can participate in the debate.
Councillor Jones.
All of the above, Mr Mayor. So I would like to recognise my involvement with the Turf Club as an honorary member could reasonably be taken as a perceived conflict of interest before the meeting, but I've considered my position and firmly the opinion that I can stay and participate in the room.
Councillor Castro.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Like Councillor McDonald, I can't recall whether I did or whether I didn't, but just in case, there is a real or perceived conflict of interest if I did. So, Mr Mayor, I will be staying in the room because I believe that I can debate and vote on this matter in the public interest.
Okay. Councillor Belden.
Can I ask item 3?
Yeah, we're doing item 3.
Oh, okay.
You want to move something?
Right. You want to move a motion or something? I'll go back to you, Councillor Belden.
My motion is that officers liaise with the Gold Coast Turf Club on securing funding in cash and in kind for the filling of the Borrow Pit, Gold Market Road, to maximise its utilisation for future public open green space, horse exercising and overflow car parking for precinct events. So moved.
Seconder, Councillor Vorster. Councillor Tozer.
I'll just make a declaration that I seem to recall that in light of what's been proposed today and what I had read, this seems to be a bit different. So I'll note that I was offered honorary membership of the Gold Coast Turf Club and did not refuse it, but I haven't used it. But I understand that might be perceived as a conflict of interest, but I'll stay in the room and vote on the matter in the public interest.
Okay. Right. Anyone else? I'll go to Councillor Baildon. Speak for the motion.
Pass some of these on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Gold Coast Show Society is the oldest community event within the Gold Coast. It celebrates 111 years in 2017. It's been held in 4 locations during this period. Firstly, at Woodruff Park in Southport, which was the original city square. And I still remember the bandstand that was sitting there in the middle of it for many, many years. It's the area just behind the Southport, the now Southport RSL. Then it was moved to Owen Park in Queen Street in Southport. Then it was moved to Parklands in Southport. That was on the because of the relocation and the closing of the Southport school within Southport itself, and it was moved out to Owen Park. It's currently now, of course, shifted and is now currently at the Gold Coast Turf Club. Originally, when it was out at Parklands, there were 2 actual areas where was the greyhound racing and also the trots, or as they were known in those days. Both of those no longer exist, and as we know that the area was taken over for the improvements, particularly with regard to the coming of the major event games. The car parking facilities at the Turf Club during that time, in the training track or Ken Russell Court, there was 1,100 car parks. At that time we had 4,500 car parks at Parklands and in that vicinity. With the relocation to the Turf Club, we now have on the training track at Ken Russell Court 1,100 car parks. On Bob L's property, which is just adjacent to the Turf Club again, there's 150 car parks available there at this time. And there's also the Kuros land where there's 420 car parks. Both of those, the latter 2 that I mentioned, are on private property, and I do believe that one of them is to be developed very shortly. Traffic management plan for the Turf Club now, or for the Show Society, can cost as much as $48,000. We didn't have that expense at all when it was over at Parklands. The Gold Coast Show Society is conducted for all residents of the city, not just for those nearby in areas of the Turf Club. It must be understood that all levels of government support the relocation of the Show Society to the Turf Club, and in particular the Gold Coast City Council. Show attendees consist of mainly of families, many of whom have preschool children with babies in prams, along with the very elderly, and they want to park as close to the grounds as possible and not have to travel by public transport. Filling the borough pit will create additional 1,000 car parks for the show and other events at the particular Turf Club. I've passed across some of the programs of some of the past programs of the Turf Club, of the Show Society, and in the various categories. For example, just in the horse events there were 516 entries. I think it was in 2009. But we have other entries as well, where people like to display their scones, their sponge cakes, tarts, pies, the various craft exhibits, the poultry, or the chooks as we call them, or we used to call them. There's the birds, the goats, the dogs, they're all there. There's the art, there's the pottery, the sculpture, the bark paintings, the oil paintings, the porcelain, the ceramics, the photography, the monochrome and creative print, calligraphy, painting on oil acrylic, collage, weaving, quilting, flower arrangement, and of course orchids. And the list goes on, and some of you have seen them. as I turn my attention now to the Borrow Pit, it has been polluted for many, many years with chemicals and waste from the stables. And I've seen that myself personally, where the waste sawdust has been thrown into this Borrow Pit. The chemicals that are used very often are thrown in there. And we know from the reports that it's polluted. It may not be as bad as it used to be, but some would say it should be kept for the birds. I'd like to know how many birds have died from drinking the water that's in there. How long did these birds suffer before they died? Was it a few days, a few weeks, or a month? The water hole or Borrow Pit is unfenced with very, very steep sides. The new housing in the area really worries me because if kids drift across, and you can see it there, it's that triangle, the cursor is on it now. If the kids come across from those new developed areas just over the canal there, the sides of that Borrow Pit are quite steep, and goodness knows what could happen if they fall in and can't climb out. We're elected representatives and are in a position of trust, trusted to look after the needs of our community today. Let's live up to that trust. Thank you.
Councillor Castro, do you want to say something? Question or something? You need to go somewhere? Oh, okay. Just a second. Councillor Baildon, I caught what you said that the parking provision or the traffic provision was about $48,000 in comparison to where it was before. If that continues, what's the viability of the Gold Coast show? So can they maintain that $48,000 expenditure?
Well, they do get support from all over the community, but it is in danger. There's no doubt about that. And that's what concerns me more than anything. The show has been the longest serving event in this city, and I would want to see it continue. And I'm sure that the majority of people right out through our community, and when I presented these programs, councillors will see that these people are from right through the Gold Coast. It's not just a few people around Southport and Surfers Paradise. It's through the entire city, and the people absolutely love the Gold Coast show as they do the Mudgee Bar show.
Councillor Jones?
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Question, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, through you to the Director, and just regarding water quality, my understanding of this particular equine precinct is that there's a lot of the roof water and the stable water currently drains into this basin, and then it discharges into the canal after that. And I think last time this came to us in 2015, there was talk of maybe having the need for a detention or a retention basin as part of any future works. Is the proposed resolution wide enough to allow for what may be required in regards to a small detention or retention basin in regards to stormwater?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I believe we would have to do that as a matter of course.
Councillor Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question. I too recall the previous item which came before us, which resulted in this asset management plan being prepared. My recollection, though, was that it was somewhat different and that the request had been put to us to pass that land over for the Turf Club to undertake any necessary works on that site. This is somewhat different because it talks about securing funding in cash and in kind, and I'm just a little confused about where that responsibility would sit, whether it would rest with council, what the likely costs might be, and if I'm reading that correctly, or would the costs all be borne by the Turf Club or the Gold Coast Show Society?
Councillor Baildon, in your motion there, is the intent that the Gold Coast Turf Club, in securing the funding cash in kind, they're taking on the burden of the cash and the kind?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. They have They have written to the council previously and offered to fill it. It is their responsibility. They have undertaken.
No cost to council. Maybe we add at no cost to council. Right, Councillor Bowden, what do you think of the idea that we just clarified, just added at no cost to council? Okay. All right, Councillor Gates.
Money on it. Yeah.
Okay. And Councillor Caldwell.
Well, it's along the same lines, Mr. Mayor. I actually support exactly what Councillor Bowden's trying to achieve, but can you just remind me, perhaps through you to the director, what's the tenure of this actual site?
Council temporary retention tank, I would have thought. Asset, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is largely council land. There's, I think, some road reserve and an easement across it, but it's largely council tenure.
So would we not be better off to include in this resolution something about the CEO being authorised to enter into normal lease terms with the Gold Coast Turf Club?
Yeah, just, I guess, thinking about the resolution as it's worded, there are all of those consequential issues to be worked through. So we could do it two ways. We could have something as is proposed by Councillor Caldwell. If that wasn't the case, we didn't have any words additional to what's there, those consequential matters would have to be worked through. And if we have to come back to council to get further resolutions, that's exactly what we do. We understand the import of it, but all the issues of tenure, any regulatory responsibilities, etc., would have to be worked through consistent with current policies and legal frameworks.
I think Councillor Caldwell, if we leave it the way it is, let the Gold Coast Turf Club has a crack of trying to secure the cash in kind to do the work. Before they commence the work, they need to come and finalise this, because it might be that by the time they look into the project itself, maybe it's too big for them. And for us to talk in terms of the next bit, I'd let it come back to council.
That's fine. The other thing, I mean, it talks about really just trying to source the money for it to be filled. Again, I don't know if we should be crystal clear that council's decision today is that this site should now be filled, and that its highest and best use for the community is as an overflow car park, horse training, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's no actual direction that says that that's what we're going to do from what I can read, but I'll be guided by the CEO.
I think the import of the resolution is that that's what would happen, provided there is money other than the council money forthcoming. If that is not the case, then we're back to the status quo.
Councillor Castro, you want to speak for or against? Yes. You said you wanted to speak? Yes, please. For or against? Against, then it's over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, this matter was debated at length by the last council. This is the water body which is more commonly known as Black Swan Lake. Yes.
Well, in our asset is temporary retention tank.
Yes, but I mean that it's been sort of dubbed Black Swan Lake. So this is the same body of water that we spoke about at the last council in relation to. This is the question, because it looks to me from the map that this is the same body of water. Yes. Thank you. All right. So yeah. So this was debated at length, and Mr. Mayor, when you actually look at page 14 of the agenda, and it talks about the ongoing remediation works, and it talks about the total operational expenditure for 15-16 financial year was approximately $53,000. The combined actual and predicted operational expenditure for the 16-17 financial year is $25,000 to $40,000. Once all vegetation is established and only routine maintenance is required, the anticipated annual costs of subsequent years is between $12,500 and $18,500. So the actual cost of remediation works is actually incredibly low. I remember that the debate when we had this at the last council was how this was going to cost us $500,000, which has proven to be a little bit wide of the mark. Mr Mayor, I was actually, along with former Councillor Shepherd, the two of us are the ones who actually pushed for the Gold Coast Show Society to actually go to the Turf Club because we wanted to see the Gold Coast Show remain. There was a move at the time by the then state Labor government that that it be moved from Parklands, which of course we lost due to the upcoming Com Games, that it be moved to Carrara. No one at the Show Society was happy about that. I wasn't happy about it for the simple reason that its floodplain goes under. It was just a rotten place, quite honestly. It just couldn't go there. It never would have survived there. You've also got a big bat colony there when bats and horses really don't mix too well either. So to make sure that this was actually that the Gold Coast Show Society and the show could survive, we actually made representation to the Turf Club to say, hey, are you actually open to host this? So I'm a big supporter of the Gold Coast Show, and that's quite evident by those actions. However, this is totally wrong. This is totally wrong. This lake is home to hundreds and hundreds of birds, many species of birds. Mr Mayor?
It is a point of order. It's not a lake, Councillor Castro.
Well, this body of water, whatever you want to call it, lake, body of water.
What's the asset? What's the asset?
Body of water. I don't care what it's called, Mr Mayor. I don't give
well, you just call it a lake.
Okay, I'm now calling it a body of water, okay? It's a point of order over. So it's a body of water. This body of water, whether you like it or not, is home to hundreds of birds and many species of birds, including black swans. There was a lot of claptrap spoken by one of the councillors here saying there's only one black swan there and there's only ever been one black swan. You may recall I actually took a video and actually showed that video, and there were plenty of black swans and plenty of other birds that were there. Mr Mayor, former councillors for Division 8 have been aware of the reasons. We know the reasons. In fact, Councillor Bowden has even mentioned the reasons for why there is poor water quality in this lake. At times, there's no poor water quality since we actually did what we should have done a long time ago and took responsible for this body of water because it's on our land. So, Mr Mayor, since we've done that, as you can see, there has been no issue with the quality of water, or only at times. We get times when there's heavy rains, etc., etc. We know what the cause is. The cause is there is storm water being directed into the lake. Councillor Bowden actually said, yeah, there's manure that's uncovered that's actually on properties that's adjacent to the lake, and all those nutrients are leaching. Body of water, whatever you want to call it.
I'm just telling. I'll keep calling you. Okay. It's not a lake.
You can call it as many times as you like, Mr Mayor. But the bottom line, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that because so that's fine. I accept it's not a lake. But in the end, in essence, you know what I'm speaking about. We're speaking about the same body of water, and we're talking about the same body of water which is home to these birds. That doesn't change. Whatever you want to call it a bathtub. I don't really care what you call it. It doesn't change the situation and what this lake is used for. So that's the point that I'm trying to make. This body of water is used for. So, okay. Who's that? What? Anyway, whatever. So, Mr Mayor, regardless of whether, you're trying to throw me off my game of saying it's not a lake.
Not a lake?
I accept that. It's not a lake. But the fact is, it's a body of water. We'll go back to body of water. And the fact is, everything else I'm saying is fact. It doesn't matter what it is. This is about the environmental side of things, the fact that it's home to this bird life. The fact is the water quality is under control because we have actually taken action. Councillor Bowden just mentioned that this body of water, is actually getting sawdust and other stuff dumped into it. Well, if that's the case, he actually said that's being thrown into the lake. Well, if it's being thrown into the lake or the body of water, whatever you want to call it, if the sawdust and whatever else is being dumped into the, I'll continue to call it a body of water here, into the body of water, then that's an excuse to actually say, fill that body of water in. To me, that is actually something that we should be taking action against, because if that's being dumped into this body of water, and that is actually the home to that bird life, and it's not meant to be dumped in that body of water, then that is environmental vandalism. So why are we not taking action? If it's physically being taken and thrown in there, but not only So I don't know if that's the case, but Councillor Baildon said that this stuff is being dumped in this body of water. So regardless of that, whether that's true or whether that's not true, we know the reasons for why we've had poor water quality in the past, and that is because of, as I say, stormwater being diverted, it's manure that's actually piled up with properties adjacent to the body of water, and when it rains that actually leaches into the water, and then we're getting all the nutrients in the water, etc., etc. The only other thing that I would say is that you may also recall that the RSPCA were very strong on this matter too, and said that if this body of water is actually, and notice I've actually said that about 5 or 6, 7 or 8 times in a row now without making the mistake of lake, but there's no mistake in the rest of my argument, which is the stuff that matters, is that if this body of water is actually filled in, then this would actually cause extreme trauma, and that probably a very large percentage, and maybe up to 40% of those birds will die. For the simple reason they're territorial, the trauma of actually having to move somewhere else in the area will actually kill these birds. Mr. Mayor, you can't just step in and say, okay, well, people are doing the wrong thing and dumping a load of crap in a body of water, so therefore we better actually fill it in, turn it into a car park. That's the way you actually deal with environmental, well, whether it's environmental vandalism or whether it's environmental bad practice, whatever you want to call it. So the way to actually do it is to continue to turn a blind eye and actually say, well, yeah, but, you know, people are going to continue dumping this stuff in there, so let's just fill it in and turn it into a car park. Is that the way that this council wants to be remembered? I mean, seriously? You know, I don't really think that's a good look. Nothing has actually changed except for the better since we last debated this issue, and that is the water quality is under control because finally this council took responsibility for something that it intentionally turned a blind eye to for many, many years because they knew what was causing the problem and the council ignored it. So I'd like to congratulate the last council for finally standing up and doing something about it, and I would like to think that this council will be responsible enough to make sure that this doesn't happen because it's totally wrong.
First up, Councillor Castro, when you say that this issue was debated at length, there's other issue that was debated at length, and I allowed it to be revisited because we got new councillors. I recall recently regarding the our parks being used for animals, circus, right? That was debated at length at the last.
Order, Mr. Mayor.
Just a second.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. You're now debating.
Please sit down. I am finished. I am finished.
Point of order.
You please sit down.
I thought with a point of order you let me put the point of order
sit down
first.
so I can finish, so you can.
Okay, well,
you
that's
can
your
come
ruling.
up.
It might be incorrect.
Because what I'm saying is, even when an issue is debated at length, when we have a new election with new council, they can come back and analyse that issue and debate on it and vote on it. So it's not relevant whether how long an issue was debated at last council if a councillor wants to bring an issue up. Okay? Now you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I never said that. I'm not complaining about that. I have every right to bring it back. I never said there was no right to bring it back. I was just pointing out the fact that this was debated at length at the last council. Nothing wrong with bringing it back. I never said there was an issue with that. I was just pointing out the fact that that happened. That's all it was. It was just historical. Nothing wrong with it. I quite agree with you, Mr. Mayor. There's no reason why it shouldn't come back. I'm just pointing out there's nothing has changed except for the better, because the water quality is now a lot better. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
No, well, what's changed is Councillor Baildon has raised the issue, and that he's concerned about the Gold Coast show and the survival of our long term for the Gold Coast show. Am I right? That would be your main motivation, I would imagine, Councillor Baildon.
Yes, but also I pointed out the danger to the wildlife by being in that particular precinct, in that borrow pit.
Okay, so it's up to him to bring it up.
Sorry, I agree with you. I'm not debating. I don't have an issue with that. Thank you.
A point of clarification, please, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
And the clarification is we were told that there's been no change. Clearly, Councillor Lacastra hasn't read his agenda. The results show there's been no significant change in water quality. This is our report. He didn't read it. There's been no change in the last 12 months. And he should read the report where it says, where the experts say, EK Sure, say that the bird deaths in recent years can be attributed to an outbreak of botulism, which is in the lake, in the water body.
Now, look, we go backwards and forwards. We're picking and choosing lines in there. What I'm saying is the remediation works are working. They are working.
Read your agenda.
Nothing. Yeah, never mind. Well, it sounds like the debate's already been had, so should be a speaker against.
Councillor Vorster?
I'd like to speak in favour of the motion, if that were appropriate, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, it is. It's time for the motion. I'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I firmly believe it's time to drain the swamp. We as a city introduced the Celebrate Gold Coast event. Was introduced last term, and it was an opportunity to celebrate the birthday of the city. And I believe in the first year that we ran that event, the city was 54 years young in its modern sense. To hear Councillor Belden talk about an event with a history in excess of a century underscores just how important that event is. It's not only been around since the birth of our city in the modern sense, but really at its foundation. And for a city as young as ours, I think we need to be very careful at managing the threats to the viability of those events, because once we squander those cultural events, it's very difficult to resurrect them in any authentic way. And I know through my own committee this round, we examined an event strategy, how we hope to procure and support events that are connected with the reputation of our city. The committee's recommendation was to defer consideration of that report so we could get it right. I think that anything or any step that council took by way of the absence of action or direct action to put at risk this event would not be getting it right. And I absolutely applaud Councillor Belden putting this issue on the agenda. Mr. Mayor, this is a very special precinct at the heart of our city. It borders our cultural precinct as well, where we all hope to see more events, better attended events, and as all councillors would appreciate, whenever there's major events being planned or held, parking and traffic management are some of the items that add a lot of cost to the running of those events, but also jeopardise the experience for spectators. I only need to look at my experience with Robina Stadium to know what the difficulties of insufficient parking may mean for events. It may very well risk the viability of the Gold Coast Titans if not managed carefully in the long term. So if we have an opportunity here in the heart of our city, close to the future of our cultural precinct and in the heart of an equestrian precinct that's already had significant investment to provide car parking, even if it's informal overflow car parking, we should absolutely jump at the chance to do that. Now, a lot has been said about the lower than anticipated cost of rehabilitating the area, but even I think Councillor Lacastre referred to, there is an ongoing impost to council for maintaining or just holding the line, the environmental line in that space, in the order of $12,000 to $18,000 a year, just to hold the line environmentally at that site after we've already expended the upfront capital works to bring that site up to standard. What could we do with that extra 18,000? Could we repair 2 playgrounds? Could we fund the planting of 20,000 additional trees elsewhere in the city? I would argue that there are other opportunities, other more worthwhile opportunities to secure better environmental outcomes with that upfront capital cost and the ongoing $12,000 to $18,000 a year impost we would have to maintain this particular site. Mr. Mayor, we've made a deliberate decision as a council to go up, not out, and concentrate our population growth along the coastal strip and in some other selected areas. This site, while in an area of particular concern and importance in our city plan, isn't in the middle of a high density area where there would be demand for great big open space of exceptionally high quality. To look at it on the map, it's not serviced by public transport in any meaningful way. It's connected with, a medium intensity industry. It's not on an attractive river frontage. There isn't a defined and safe network of pathways. There's very little residential amenity connected with that precinct, Mr. Mayor. And I think if we are to invest any money, it would have to be elsewhere in the city. And I could think of many other locations where we ought to be spending money to secure better environmental outcomes. Not there, not where we could deliver up to 1,000 new car parking spaces and protect such an important part of our city's foundation, history and identity. I know it's confronting for anybody to make a decision that may impact animal life and the environment, but we don't have infinite funds. We have finite funds, and as a council we need to make a decision around the allocation of those funds. If we have money to spend and if we desire to deliver better environmental outcomes, is our money best spent here or is it best spent elsewhere? And don't we get two wins by spending money elsewhere and at no cost to council supporting an event that has been here for over a century and connected hopefully not only with the history of our city but its future as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
One of those commentary there, I would say the $12,000 to $18,000, I would rather see the funds reprovisioned towards our botanic garden so that we can have more trees and the like and enhance that our botanic asset, which is much more frequent than this retention basin. Speaking against, Councillor Peter Young.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll foreshadow the committee recommendation, and I'll tell you from the outset that I'm disturbed at how this has been brought to council now with the changed motion before us, where there was no utterance of any issue at committee, which would be a reasonable place to raise issues so people can be properly prepared and not just raise things out of the air, as has been clearly evident in today's debate. We've been told that the Show Society is at risk if it doesn't have a car park, and I have never heard such complete and utter rubbish in my entire time at council. If we really want to be mindful of the ongoing sustainability of the Show Society, and I'm sure we do, then we've got to ask ourselves a question: why has the Show Society not been able to conduct equine events, horse events, for the last 3 years of its show, where it's located in an equine precinct? And the answer is, I believe, that the Turf Club has chosen those days to run its own events. So the Show Society has been prohibited from running any horse events. There's been no show jumping, none of the other things, like dressage, all those sorts of events have not been able to be conducted at this precinct at all, even though there's been huge investment of public funds to enable the Show Society to be here. So if we're going to look at the question of the viability of the Show Society, let's turn our attention to the Turf Club. For all of those who've identified their membership, they'll be in a position to seek answers to that question. And if, in fact, the Turf Club's doing the right thing, the best it can to accommodate the interests of the Show Society, which we're all here to stand and defend as being an important part of our city's culture. Furthermore, if we're talking about replacing this body of water with a car park, there's been no confirmation exactly how many car parks we might be able to create. But my firm understanding is that within the cultural precinct, we do endeavour to provide a car parking facility, and that obviously will serve a broader area. It will serve the Turf Club, which accommodates the Show Society and the show, and the Cultural Precinct. So providing a costly car park in one precinct that's only going to provide a small number of car parks seems to compromise the most efficient use of public funds, whereby we put those funds into a car park in the Cultural Precinct. It's been claimed that the water quality has not improved. Only by people who have not read the report, obviously, because the report clearly says to us that the water quality has improved. They're not exactly sure how, because of the circumstances that have prevailed over the last year or so. But I do have a copy of a report that was prepared independently by the Bulimba Creek Catchment Coordinating Committee. They've used expertise that we shouldn't question, but I'm happy to provide the report to all the councillors. This was completed in August 2016, and I'll repeat that, it's August 2016, and it shows that with pH, sulphate, conductivity and nitrogen, at least, all of those units of measurement or metrics have reduced. So there's less pH, the sulphate levels are less, the nitrogen levels are less, the conductivity has improved. These are obvious markers or indicators that the water quality has improved. And in fact, what we have before us is a recommendation in such that the benefits that this water body provides in terms of its environmental performance, what it's doing for the water quality, that it should be retained. Page 15 of the agenda says midway, the existing water quality treatment function of the water body should be retained. It also says if we weren't to do that, if we were to do away with this water body, then what we would have to do is provide sufficient land area that's designated for water quality improvement and stormwater conveyance purposes, including the construction of a bioretention system or similar. And of course, a bioretention system requires frequent maintenance. It's not something you just put there and hope it's going to last forever. It will require ongoing annual maintenance at the minimum. The report also says we should investigate the potential of a coordinated daily clean-up of manure and associated waste from council-controlled areas within the precinct, including the possibility of recouping the associated costs. And it also says we should embark upon increased monitoring and surveillance of private horse stable facilities to minimise contamination emanating from these sites. The water body isn't the problem. It's the land use around it that is the problem. And if we take away the water body, we take away the function that it is performing in improving the water quality before it's discharged into the lake system adjacent. If you take it away, there is no cost, as was claimed by Councillor Worcester. He said no cost to council. Untrue. There is a cost to council. There will be a cost to council to implement the proper water quality treatment systems, a cost in an ongoing way to manage those systems, and a cost to manage the disposal of material from the horses in the local area. The site is subject to a number of codes in Council's planning scheme. Code 3, Canals and Waterways, Code 36, Vegetation Management, Code 11, Change the Ground Level, Code 14, Sediment and Erosion Control, Code 9, Natural Wetland Areas. We expect our developers to abide by the city plan, and when they come forward, we expect them to provide significant detail in how they're going to address each of the particular codes, and in this case, these are the relevant ones. It's really wrong for us to, on the fly, just say, no, we're going to replace that and put in a car park, where our town plan gives us clear guidance as to the proper way to do this. And I believe it is wrong for a member of the Show Society and the Turf Club to stand and say that we, being the Show Society, need this for car parking, whereas a report in front of us clearly says to us the public interest is best served, the broader public interest is best served by retention of the basin. Birds Queensland has recorded an extensive list of birds at this site. I don't have that list with me, but I'm not willing to just laugh it off and say these animals will just go elsewhere. So we're told there's a current cost of $12,000 to $18,000 per annum. No one's able to demonstrate to me what the cost might be per annum to replace this water body, put in the systems that have been identified as necessary and maintain them on an ongoing basis. I don't mind things being evaluated again by a new council, Mr Mayor, but I don't appreciate the opportunity or the lack of opportunity that's been properly given to us by virtue of the motion in front of us today. I can't support it. I'll support the foreshadowed motion, which is the committee recommendation. We note the report. That does not mean that we can't revisit this issue at a later point in time if that's considered necessary. Our objective of trying to defend the city's environment, defend the city's social and cultural heart is important, but we shouldn't be just loosely throwing our support behind a motion that has not been properly thought through, has not been well argued for, and compromises so many legitimate outcomes. Thanks.
Just a second.
To cut through all this, I mean, that's harmless by itself.
Okay, we had against. Now I'll ask anyone want to speak for the motion. I'll go to Councillor Critchlow.
A lot of people haven't seen the eco report, obviously, or read the agenda, but the eco report clearly says that ongoing costs will be $26,180 per year to maintain this. And we waited 12 months. We spent 12 months testing all this, and the results show there's no significant change in water quality until two significant rain events in June 2016. Prior to these events, the water remained highly turbid and exceeded state guidelines for water quality parameters such as nitrogen, phosphate and that. And now that's in the report, Mr Mayor. What we should be doing, quite frankly, is 2.7 hectares of land. We should be filling it in ourselves and selling it off and making some money for the cultural centre. But having said that, Mr Mayor, look, horses exercise there of an afternoon. They exercise on the track of a morning. They exercise there of an afternoon. Right? It's as simple as that. So the water quality will remain. And Councillor Young wants us to put people in to clean up the manure. That's a team of two at 60,000 plus on costs. That's another 150,000 a year.
Point of clarification,
and
just a second, just get the clarification. Okay, then I'll come back to you.
That's he wants us to do that. Look, it's a borrow pit. The sand was taken out. It's nothing else other than that. It was taken over the track. That's how we inherited it as a council. And that's the way it should be filled in, and then everybody's happy. And what Councillor Bolden said's right. That area is becoming multi-unit area, and kids will be walking in there. What are you going to, next thing, we'll have somebody pop up and say, now we've got to fence that. And there's enormous expense, because at the moment it could be a danger. Let's fill it in. You see on the screen the colour of it compared to the canal development around it. And that's where at the moment, the first one you put up, not that one that looks good there. Put the first one up. But at the moment, you know, nothing's happening. We, the Turf Club, have spent $4 million on making that big convention area. They're getting a lot of things happening there. They will need parking for there. And I think it's been very wrong. And I think the show could go really backwards because they've been parking at Evandale. The people have been parking with their little kiddies and others in the stroller and walking all the way. And you can see the looks on their faces. They're not going to come back next year. And by the way, Evandale won't be there next year because that will be taken up with cultural concerts and things like that. So there will be nowhere for them, for the people to park. It's as simple as that. Let's move forward. We're saying, okay, the Turf Club, you fill it in, you took the sand out, now we're going to charge you to fill it back in again. Fill it in, and at no cost to council, and then you've got a very nice open area, both for the equine district and for the people to kick a football too of an afternoon. So let's move forward. We don't want this sort of thing. People in the area have told me there's swans breeding on the canal next door. They're not in that. They are dying in there, as this report said. It said the reserve contains 2.7 man-made water body which suffers from recurrent poor water quality. The water body is subject to a range of pressures resulting from catchment land use practices and associated runoff, catchment size and connectivity, structural habitat conditions, and invasion of exotic species. Water quality is diminished by high nutrient loads which are likely to be attributable to runoff from the equine centre. Algae blooms are relatively common, and bird deaths in recent years can be attributed to the outbreak of botulism. So it's all happening there, and that's from EcoSure. That's from EcoSure. That's from an environmental company who does reports for council, and here it is. That clearly it shows we should have done this last year, Mr Mayor, instead of saying, no, well, we won't take notice of what EcoSure's got to say. What we'll do our own testing for this year. Let's move forward and let the Turf Club figure out whether they can afford to fill it in as they took the sand in the first place. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr Peter Young,
Mayor, points of clarification. First of all, Councillor Critchlow said that costs are somewhere in the report at 28,000 or something of that nature.
No, I said 28,180, Mr Mayor.
Yeah. Report, page 14, says, once all vegetation is established and only routine maintenance is required, the anticipated annual costs for subsequent years are between 12,500 and 18,500.
Point of clarification, Mr Mayor.
And secondly,
Microorganism technologies, it's 8,200 a year. Aeration system, $2,980 a year. Edge treatment, 1,100 a year. Harvesting, $13,640 a year.
I'm not sure what that's from, and I didn't feel any small excitement at all. Mr Mayor, if I might just then, the other issue was that Councillor Critchlow said that I want us to clean up the manure, and clearly that's not the case. I want the lake or water body to be retained, but the report says that the existing water quality treatment function of the water body should be retained. Following options should be investigated. Investigate the potential of a coordinated daily clean-up of manure and associated waste from council-controlled areas. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Speak against.
Yeah.
Donald?
Could you please, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to know what action has been taken since this was last discussed by council in relation to the manure from the associated stables. What action's been taken to make sure that that's not happening? Do we know? Or has nothing been done?
I haven't done anything. It's a question to me.
Mr. Ash.
Oh, Mr. Ash, have you done something there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've been liaising with our environmental health officers, and they've actually gone out there and done a lot more surveillance, and they've actually pinned some of the stables, the people who are managing the stables out there for inappropriate use, inappropriate pollution. It's all inappropriate.
So do you find them? Or
Yeah, they get fined, Mr. Mayor.
so there's additional policing has been done by our health officer, right?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, it's of concern to me that if this lake is filled in, that you know the runoff.
Lake.
It is actually.
Sorry.
Well, the definition of a lake is. Well, actually, in the report,
temporary retention basin.
In the report, it does say lake.
I'm telling you,
and
it says that was known to be by people like Councillor Castro calling it Swan Lake.
Mr. Mayor, it just says on page 14, other similar sized lakes in the city, and a definition, a large lake. A lake is a large area of water surrounded by land, and I'd say
Council asset and was dug up and as a retention basin.
Point of clarification. Actually, Councillor McDonald isn't actually wrong. The definition of a lake is a large area of land, of water surrounded by land.
Yeah, but when you go back to our lengthy discussion at the last term, it was a temporary retention basin. I can't make those words up, I can tell you.
I can recall another area in our city, Mr. Mayor, where it's classed as a canal when it's actually a drain.
I'll deal with you in a second, McDonald.
Mr. Mayor, if this lake is removed, and it says here, and we are all picking out certain sections of
Sorry, are you asking a question?
I am. It's got here that being deposited on public lands remains a long-standing contamination source of surrounding waterways. So if this doesn't go into the lake, we're going to see more runoff into the other surrounding waterways. And I just want to ask the officers what's happening with that to contain that. I know that on page 15, it's got here that it's going to be a system put in place. But if we're getting rid of a big area of a water body here, doing a little retention area, I can't see how that's going to solve the issue of any runoff that's going to go into that other water body.
Okay, could you put the topographical map? See on the right there where you got the turf club? Water will find its way to its lowest level, right? So without doing any further study, I would say that the runoff will be directing to the turf club retention. But Mr. Ash, have you got any additional information there?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. There are 3 minor pipe systems actually discharging into the lake, into the water body itself, and they need to be picked up. They need to be picked up and actually diverted around the outs. If the lake was to be filled, it would have to be diverted.
It's not a lake, I'm telling you.
Sorry. The water body would have to be diverted around the outside of the water body, and the water body's function at the moment is actually, does it provide a water quality improvement type facility? We'd have to replace that in some shape or form by a retention system. So the 3 systems would go into like an open channel, then through a bioretention system. It would then leave the lake as it does now through a low flow pipe.
Sit down. Right. Anyone want to speak against the motion? Go to Councillor Caldwell.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just speak briefly for this motion. Councillor Young has intimated that this is being done on the fly today, but the report clearly states there's not less than 3 resolutions of council that have previously dealt with this issue. It has been a long-standing issue and one which I feel we have given adequate consideration to over a long period of time. We gave it more than enough of an ample opportunity to recover this particular body of water, and it hasn't. And Mr Mayor, it came forward to us at the request of the Turf Club and the Show Society because they needed car parking spaces. It's really that simple. And I'm speaking in favour of this motion because I'm speaking in favour of the Gold Coast Show and making sure that we preserve that for generations to come. And quite frankly, they copped a really bad situation when they had to relocate to less than ideal circumstances at the Turf Club, and everyone's tried to make it work as best they can, and quite frankly we now need to put our best foot forward to do our bit to help them out as well. So they are trying to retrofit a show into a less than ideal circumstance, and part of the solution we know is making sure that people can get to and from the show. And the transport over recent years has been woeful, and on the back of all of that, we've all heard the rumours that the show will end. And whether that's true or not, the reality is that when word gets out there, people start to worry about these things, and they know that it's because things like the car parking is an unsustainable situation at the moment. So, Mr Mayor, I have absolutely no dramas in supporting Councillor Baldwin finally bringing this matter to an end and filling in the lake. It's well past time. And I'll withdraw my allegation that it's a lake, and I will refrain from commenting in relation to the Hope Island Flood Mitigation Channel, which I think was referred to earlier by Councillor McDonald. Mr Mayor, the water quality here, if this was not on council land, if this was a private developer who had simply dug a hole and let it fill up with crappy water, we would be issuing public health orders for this to be filled in. That would be what our expectation would be as a city to maintain public health. So this is twofold.
Point of order.
It's true. Doesn't
Mr Mayor, we wouldn't be issuing a demand that the water body be filled, would be issuing a demand that the water quality be improved.
So, Mr Mayor, having been down that path for the last 12 months and having tried to fix the water quality and nothing has changed, if we can't provide a safe body of water, then in my view, we would have to ask for more drastic steps to be taken. So council in these circumstances has a public role to play in making sure this body of water is safe, which clearly it's not. So in doing this, we fix 2 things. Firstly, we get rid of a dirty body of water that should never have been there in the first place. And secondly, we provide future proofing for the Gold Coast Show, which I'm happy to support.
Hear, hear. I'll speak against. Right. Councillor Bell, do you want to close? Councillor Gates? Just a second, Councillor Bell.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I had just wanted to make a couple of points, if I may, in favour of Councillor Baldwin's motion. We are a city of 5 rivers and more canals than Venice. Yep. We hear that frequently. We look at the overhead which has been provided to us today, and it's very clear for those of us who have concern about the wildlife, and all of us have concern about wildlife, but it's very clear that any wildlife can take a hop to the left or a skip to the north. They can adequately and easily reach another water body. If they go west, they've got the retention basin in the Turf Club. If they go a little further north, they've got all of the ponds within the Southport Golf Club. So I have no fear that these birds and wildlife are going to find somewhere for their young. There's plenty of vegetation around the walkway around the canal. It's clear that there is a walkway around the canal, and all of us have seen the massive development on the corner of Hebe Street and Racecourse Drive, and the childcare centres that have recently gone into that precinct. I think 2 or 3 approvals in that nearby precinct. So the growth is significant. The waterways are abundant, and there are opportunities for bird and wildlife. What we don't have an opportunity for is additional facilities and amenities to support the Gold Coast Show and the Turf Club. In Councillor Vorster's or Councillor Bowden's initial opening, he mentioned some land just to the west of the Turf Club that's privately owned that has been used for 100 car parking spaces. That land, just yesterday I saw, has a development application advertising board on it. So that land is no longer going to be available should a development approval issue on that land. So we have one of the oldest societies in our city being given a raw deal by the government, being supported in relocation to a venue that has not proved to their benefit at all. And I question the sense in actually that recommendation now that we've since seen that it hasn't been available previously for the equine events. I think we would have all hoped that in going to a turf club that would be the first thing that might be available as part of the show. Maybe there's an opportunity to work on that. If there's additional space available for people to bring their horses, park their trailers, park their cars, I think it makes perfect sense that we have endorsed this precinct as an entertainment precinct along with the cultural precinct. We have a responsibility, Mr. Mayor, to make sure people can get there. And it wouldn't be our responsibility, in my opinion, if there wasn't another option for the wildlife and the bird life. But clearly there is. There's an abundance of waterways and they're much cleaner and healthier than that body of water that we're looking at before us there. I can't understand why anyone would want to protect a murky cesspit that has been used as a drainage pit for so long. And we all know that there's been penalty infringement notices issued because Mr. Ash has told us so today. Are they ongoing? Probably. And are they going to have to keep on issuing those notices? Probably. But it will be more apparent if it's not draining into a murky body of water and if it's being left on level ground. So I would think that practice would very swiftly come to a close if the action is taken to make this land available for recreation and car parking. And I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that it is also going to be available for recreation, not always car parking, but just overflow car parking and in the main recreation. So people will be able to actually exercise their dog on a far greater area of land and have the enjoyment of the nearby waterway. It can be a better outcome for everyone, in my view.
Councillor Belden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to all of those councillors who have spoken in favour. I appreciate their support. This is a very, very important issue to me, and I keep hearing people talk about lakes and water holes and so forth. It's a borrow pit, and the word borrow really gives you the indication that sometime in the future it has to be paid back. That's all I'm asking, is that the area be replaced, that the fill go back in there, as it says, a borrow pit. Very, very simple. And this business about thousands of birds is just ridiculous. My question is, how many thousand has it killed? Councillors, for the sake of the future of our city, and I'm talking about those traditional things like the Gold Coast Show and so forth, and for the long term of the Turf Club itself, for our community, please support this motion.
Yeah. Debate's closed, councillors. I put the motion to you.
Vision.
All those in favour, show of hands.
Councillor Tozer, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Vorster, Councillor Critchlow, Councillor Bowden, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Bolden, Councillor Gates, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Tate.
Against.
Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Castro.
Carried.
Sorry, Councillor McDonald, beg your pardon, Mr. Mayor.
You got that one right? Carried. Supermajority. Next item.